This is the Domain Magnet Show, where you'll learn everything you need to know about buying, optimizing, and selling online businesses with your host, Michael Beroslavsky.
Hello. This podcast is brought to you by Domain Magnet, where we buy and grow online businesses for investors and funds. And over the past 16 years, we've completed hundreds of transactions. To learn more, go to domainmagnet.com. And today's guest is Sam Bess, the founder of chiefoperators.io. Hi, Sam.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, cool to have you here. So tell me a little bit briefly about your background. How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I've always been an entrepreneur and run different companies. And over the last maybe 12 months, maybe a bit longer, I've been looking at buying different sites. And whilst I was looking at different sites for sale, I started a small e-commerce brand because I was trying to decide between buying in the different verticals. Do I want to go into SaaS, e-commerce, content? And so I learned a bit about Shopify starting the e-commerce site. But then I kind of ran out of time. I had multiple companies at the time. And so I looked for someone to try and run that company for me. So I spoke to a few different people that I knew in the space about how they found operators or if they were able to find operators. And some of the other guys who do investments who have what I wanted to do in the future, which is have a portfolio of websites. And they all pretty much said that finding operators was really tough. And I thought that was really interesting that everyone had exactly the same response. Like the first sentence was pretty much the same. Yeah, that it's really tough to find an operator. So I thought that's an interesting problem and tried to solve it. And that's how I kind of ended up with Chief Operators.
Yeah, finding good operators is definitely a challenge because you want someone who has experience working on the same type of business and have a proven track record and reasonable cost. All those together can be a challenge. That's true.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's lots of things there that you want to try and get right. And obviously that makes a massive difference. The closer you can to getting those as perfect as possible.
Yeah, this is actually a similar challenge we've encountered a few years ago when we started raising some capital and buying some sites for investors. And I thought at some point maybe we'll find some good operators and work with some agencies. And we tried a few, but it just didn't work. We very quickly we realized that the only way is just to develop our own capabilities to manage sites well. But of course, for us, it's different. That was basically our main objective, right? But for most investors, they don't have that luxury of hiring and going through this whole process and arranging everything. So for them, certainly it could be a good way to just find a good operator right away.
Yeah, as I'm sure you know, it's a lot of work to get the hiring process right and then onboarding and that sort of stuff. So I imagine you have like a couple of managers at Domain Magnet, like across a few different sites. That's kind of the structure.
We have over 20 people now on the team. So there are managers and there's a couple levels of management now. And we have managers managing sites, and then we have different people who have expertise in different areas so that they can contribute to the different businesses.
Nice.
And so let's talk a little bit more about how you got into this. How long have you been involved with online businesses in general, and what was like your biggest success or the biggest business so far?
Yeah, I had a kind of varied career over the time running different companies. The biggest one I have at the moment is in-person company. So it's kind of a services company in like a traditional kind of industry where you provide social sports services to people. And what I did there was try to bring it into the 21st century and make it online so people can book online. You had all your reviews online, all your fixtures, everything was done online. Which a lot of the old school sports centers and things here in Australia didn't do. So that company still runs and I have a CEO. They actually started today to run that one. And yeah, that's kind of the genesis back. That was 6 or 7 years ago that company started. And since then, I've just always been fascinated about the different websites that are out there, and kind of going, once you realize how websites rank in Google and stuff, you kind of, it's like going into the matrix. You learn how all these things work and trying to figure out. I really like business models, just trying to see what's the business model behind this site. I always find that really fascinating, seeing people who've done interesting things there.
Yeah, me too. I love looking at like new different businesses. And so that company, how big is it, just to give our listeners an idea in terms of employees or revenue or something like that?
Yeah, so we do 7 figures revenue, and there's three staff at the moment, and then we're hiring 1 or 2 more. So it's kind of technical, yeah.
And what's the main service you provide?
So it's social sports competitions. So we do like basketball competitions for people to play for fun after work. Netball. What else do we do? Volleyball.
Oh, that's interesting. So you organize a competition for people to play.
Yeah. The aim is like you play as a kid, and that's what you do when you go to school and stuff. You might play sports for fun with friends. University, you definitely, or some people definitely do, is like the social sport where you're playing but kind of with friends. And then when you go to work and you work a 9 to 5, you end up working longer hours. You stop playing, you stop seeing your friends. So it's just a chance for people to kind of get off their phone, off the internet, go and run around with your mates for 45 minutes.
And how does it make money? Do people just pay a participation fee?
Yeah, it's a great business model because you pay upfront for the season. So a season is 12 weeks, you pay up front, and then that gets you access for the 12 weeks of competitions. And we do everything else, basically, all the fixtures, referees, venues. You just have to show up and play. Okay,
so it's because I remember when I was younger, I used to go with friends to play football from time to time, and we would usually have like one or two guys from the group who are usually the organizers, like setting things up. I've never really considered that could be a business model. That's really interesting. So people are willing to pay for that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Awesome. They get to play for fun, but they get a proper referee and it's a proper court, and everything's properly set up. But taking it online was the key there, because it made it a lot easier for people to organize their team. We have, app notifications and stuff. So taking these traditional things and putting them online is definitely a viable and interesting thing even to do today.
You have a league of your own, like a social playing league?
Do I have one?
Yeah. Have you set up, or is it just random, just like unconnected competitions?
So we have a few different competitions. I don't know how many exactly off the top of my head, but we've got about 5,000 people maybe playing every week through our competitions that we organize.
Oh, very cool. That's a very interesting business model. So how did you get from that to looking into online businesses?
Yeah, so I kind of built that website myself just on WordPress. This was like 2014, maybe 2013. And then I started learning about everything online advertising, Facebook ads, all of the different plugins, email marketing, and then just kind of went down the rabbit hole of each one of those. Each month, I'd just go down the rabbit hole and learn how people were doing it and best practices today. And doing that, I joined some entrepreneurship communities. And that kind of really opened my eyes to like people having content sites online, making really good money, and their business model behind that. And then you kind of go down the track of how does your site make money, and comparing notes on how they're doing it.
Yeah, very nice. And so then did you buy some other websites or online businesses after that, or did you try building some new ones?
Yeah, I've had a few different websites, but I haven't bought any yet. I was looking at buying some, and I'm still in the process of buying some, but I started a few, and that was what happened with the e-commerce one. It's kind of started that on a weekend with a kind of a challenge with a few friends to start a Shopify site, and learned quite a lot just doing that. And that's kind of took me down the e-commerce path. And now I should have an operator in to run that one at the moment.
Is it profitable already?
Yeah, it's profitable. Yeah, it was profitable pretty much from day one. But Shopify or like e-commerce is such a different beast to like the content sites, because you can literally get revenue off day one. just by doing some organic outreach, but then obviously paid ads as well, just make a big impact straight away.
Yeah, very nice. Awesome. Also, tell us a bit more about Chief Operators. How did you start it, and what's the vision behind it?
Yeah, Chief Operators is probably started maybe 3 or 4 months ago. It was originally planned to be kind of a job board. It kind of became a newsletter, and then we've kind of ended up with a community for a few different reasons. But I really enjoy the community model. It's a lot of fun to share ideas as well as connections in there. And basically, the premise of it is to connect investors wanting to buy cash flowing internet businesses with operators that have been there, done that, and have experience running websites in that niche. And yeah, I love it. It's super interesting to me, and I think it's interesting to other people because it hopefully helps minimize the risk for the investor. They get a proven operator to run their acquisition.
So it's funny because I had an interview on this podcast to run with it a few months ago, and then I exactly described this idea. Like, it's a podcast where you have to come up with a unique business idea, and that's the idea I described for them. To have a marketplace that would connect operators and business owners and would basically charge fees for participation as a commission. And then I stumbled upon yours, and I thought this is really interesting. So I've joined. I've had a chance to look through a little bit. It looks like it's still relatively new, right? I think there is maybe less than 100 people. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just around about 100 people at the moment.
Okay, and so far, have there been any deals or any operators and investors connected, if you know?
Yeah, so we're only a few months old, so we don't have public case studies yet, but we have a few people that have connected online and are searching at the moment. And we have a few operators that might have found investors as well through contacts in the network as well. So they're at the moment trying to set up basically contracts for the operators or agreements for the operators and agree on those. So they're in that kind of stage. But I'm going to try and get some of those guys to do some case studies once they're public and have been running for 3 months and kind of can give us a bit of a review on how they thought the process went. I think that'll be the next step and really useful for people.
Excellent. And so what did you learn so far doing it? Are there more operators or investors? Which ones are easier to attract to the platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say operators is definitely harder. It's quite easy to get general operators. So like if you put a post out saying, I'm looking for operators for the community, you might get a lot of replies. But then the percentage of those guys that have experience, which in Chief Operators, we kind of loosely define as having run or sold a site in the 6 to 8 figure range. So the percentage of those guys is quite small usually compared to like the general population. And then obviously trying to get in touch with those guys. It's not like a job title where you have a set definition. If you run a website, it's kind of a more unique thing if you're a founder or entrepreneur in that sense. But investors in general is a lot more easier to attract because especially at the moment with all the other options for investing, taking a hit or being very expensive makes website investing very attractive to people. And
so are most of your members currently investors?
No, most of the members are operators. So I've focused on operators because they're the harder ones to get. So I know I can get investors. So yeah, vast majority of people in there are operators.
Okay, fair enough. And what's kind of the next step in the process? You got some operators and you'll advertise, have some more investors. How do you plan to kind of get them connected and grow and monetize it?
Yeah, so it's on a community platform. So the aim is to just be that first initial point where you connect with people. And that isn't often like in the first week. You don't usually join and then connect with someone, although that's possible. It's kind of building relationships with people over time, seeing what investors are buying, what types of sites, what operators are commenting. So you can kind of get an overview on what if you would be a good match. So the next step immediately is to get more investors into the community. So we have we had about 200 on the waiting list. I think it's down to 100 and something. So I do a personal call with everyone. So trying to get more of those investors into the community who are looking to buy sites. And then long term, as it's a community, it's not really a marketplace or like there's not a deal structure you have to go through where we take a set commission and you have to follow a certain structure. It's a bit more open than that. So that means we have a few different monetization options, from paid communities to finders or brokerage type fees, through to sponsorships and all sorts of different interesting things with partners and things like that, which we're going to explore in the future. And but at the moment, just focusing on getting the quality of the group really good, because we want to do one thing really well, and so we're trying to be very specific about the members that we let into the community.
Yep, very good. And what have you seen so far in terms of the best way to connect between operators and investors? What specifically do investors look for?
Yeah, so from an investor's point of view, if you're making an acquisition, the biggest thing is usually risk. Making an acquisition is obviously a scary prospect, especially the first time. So anything you can do that minimizes the risk is awesome. And that's why buying a website's good, because it should already have product market fit, especially as you get bigger scale or bigger price size. So in an operator, they're just looking for the person that has the best fit to that company. Usually the easiest thing for them is if you have run basically the same site in the same industry and taken it from the same multiple, 500K revenue to 1.5 or 1 million to 5 million, because you basically would already have the playbook there in place, and you can just slot in. You can take equity in the company and grow it, and that investors willing to do that because it saves them a lot of risk, knowing they have the right person to take it.
And in terms of structure, like equity versus fixed pay or some other structures, what have you seen that investors typically prefer?
I would say, if it's acquisition, the investors usually prefer equity, a percentage of the equity, just because it aligns incentives. Obviously, lower equity is good for the investors, but it just means that they're on the same page long term, have the same goals. We also have investors that have a portfolio of sites and then advertise on there for an operator for one of their sites. And those ones range a bit more. Often that's a bit more salary based with a smaller percentage of equity, because they already own the site. They're just looking for someone to come in and operate it.
And what would be the typical equity range of percentages that you've seen? And does it require the operator to put some money towards it, or usually not?
Yeah, so I can say what we've seen so far. So we only have a relatively small number of in the community, and so a smallish number of deals, like case study wise. But so far, from the people I've spoken to, spoken to a lot of people each day. The kind of equity split is kind of around 5% to 40%. It's just a very general range to get people in the ballpark for the operator. It mainly varies on how much money the operator puts in. So sometimes I'd say the average is kind of 5%, just to make sure on an acquisition that they have some skin in the game. But I've seen operators put in up to 50, 60% as well. And then the percentage of equity kind of varies on their experience. So if they're the perfect person, obviously you can ask for more. And if you have lots of experience, you can get higher equity. And a little bit on the deal size. So the smaller the deal is, the more equity the operator be getting, because they have experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's similar to what we've been doing as well. With our first fund, the structure was that we put 10% and we took 50% of the profit. So that however, we kept the equity as the equity was fixed to the initial contribution. So our equity was still 10%, but we decided to change it as a profit distribution. That's what we've done with the second and third fund as well. So that's interesting.
So that model worked well for you. Like that's why you kept it for the second and third fund. You thought that was a good fit.
Well, Yeah, it seems to work well. I think it's kind of hard to compare because in order to really compare, you have to try both over like a longer period of time, and then you have enough data to compare and see what works best. So that's can be a little tricky. But I have seen, I know other people in the industry who are doing funds like what you described, based on having a higher equity. Like they would take maybe 30% equity and put like 10%. And yeah, and that's especially important when you have a kind of an open fund structure that allows you to, for existing members to sell their shares, or for the fund to be reevaluated and sell shares at a higher price. And then it's much better if you have more equity. But with closed funds, maybe it doesn't make as much sense, because if there is no opportunity to sell your shares to anyone, or like the value of the fund doesn't really matter, right? Because no one is going to buy it. You only you want like the plan is, and that's what we've done with all our funds so far. They are non-tradable. They are closed-ended, so the existing investors cannot exit. They just have to wait for us to resell everything or sell the fund. So yeah, depends on the structure.
Yeah.
And so what are the current opportunities for operators in the industry? I have personally seen there is quite a lot of operators coming up with, of course, with the Empire Flipper, CFC Capital. They have been able to find quite a few experienced operators, and I see there are many in the industry now that are kind of coming up and taking a slightly more public profile, right, and looking for opportunities. But what are the opportunities for operators, and specifically ones who already have some experience and some case studies, and those who don't?
Yeah. If anyone hasn't checked it out, check out the Empire Flippers Capital. It's a very similar model to the Chief Operators one. And I think they're releasing their fund in next round in September. So it should be live the next round for operators. But yeah, a lot of the smart operators are kind of building a public profile now, saying, hey, I have experience doing these operators. I've been in the industry for 5 to 10 years, and building a brand because come to investing time, then that really helps. So I think, the smart people are getting operators track records now, because that's what investment playbooks are based on. The size of the fund you can raise is based on your track record. So the guys who've been doing it for 5 years have a head start. But if you can start now, I think a lot of money's coming in. I'm sure you'd agree, to website investing. So if you have your track record set up now, you're going to be in a great position as a lot of that money comes in, where the percentage of the money that actually wants to run the site, or has the knowledge even to run the site, is tiny. Like kind of this bigger public money outside of the sort of website world. So yeah, if you can position yourself as an operator with a track record in a certain niche, that's super exciting. As multiples go up, your return goes up, and hopefully you should be able to get a much better role than just a pure salary based role, because when you exit, you have a percentage of that company. And if multiples go up and you manage to grow it just by following a basic playbook, then you should be able to have a good exit in 2 to 4 years time, or whatever time you choose for selling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've seen as well. So since we've been in the industry for about 15, 16 years now, that allows us to have a longer track record than most others. And that certainly helps with attracting investors. But we also had a few people on the podcast who are quite successful operators, like Don Wells from Onfolio and Mohit Tatter from Black Book Investments. So listeners can look up those episodes, and they are both doing quite well, and they've been doing it for a long time as well, with many deals successfully. And so I think it's like being able to showcase a few case studies to show that you have the system, the structure, that you've had some successes. That just sets you apart, so that's huge. But also another thing is you have to be more or less in the same range, like the same type of business, right? If you've only done like $50,000 deals and have grown them a little bit. That's different. Like you're not gonna be able to go and use that to get $1 million business to run, most likely, because it is quite a big difference. So you have to be more or less close to the range that you are targeting. And so like increasing that capacity gradually is probably the best advice to operators. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Is you can't start at the big end. You have to work your way up and get experience. So starting at the smaller side and then just growing that size, saying, hey, I've already proved I can do it from this range to this range. I want to do it from this range. Just by gradually doing that, so like low six figures, doing a few of those deals, then maybe mid, and then trying to do a 7-figure deal. Because everything is based on track record. So yeah, you have to just do it gradually over time.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing as well. So we've started with some very small deals, and then have been doing many 5-figure deals, and then the last few years mostly 6-figure deals, and we are gradually getting ready to do our first 7-figure deals next year. So it's certainly a process of learning, and but in reality, it's pretty similar when you think about it, the business, the 5-figure business or the 7-figure business. If they are content sites, it's quite similar. The things you need to do is just bigger scale, lower risks.
Yeah, what I've seen so far is that actually easier as you get bigger, up to kind of in a certain range, because like the site has more customers, so you're able to test more things. You have a bit more of product market fit. You know where you're going. The smaller side is actually really hard. So if you can prove your skills there, it sets you up well. And the other thing I'd say is like pick your lane early on. So like if it's content sites, kind of stay in the content site space, because if you run content sites and you say, oh, I want to run an e-com site, it has different knowledge that you're going to have, logistics and stuff are very different to a content site. So yeah, it's very hard to say I've run this big site, but I want to run this different one. So if you can stay in your lane, then that really helps multiply. And then as you say, you're getting to 7-figure deals, then after that, it kind of multiplies over time. That's what's really exciting for me, is that you can keep going bigger and bigger as multiples rise, valuations are going to rise, and which means exits are going to rise, money reinvested rises. And then if you're a part of that as the whole industry rises, it's a really good place to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I certainly agree that first you should specialize, and then you can look into branching out once you are established in one vertical, one type of business. Yeah. So from the investor points of view, how do you choose an operator? How do you find a good operator? How do you test them? What to pay attention to?
Yeah, if you're an investor, I think the most common thing is to kind of go straight onto the brokerages and look at different sites that you can buy, because that's kind of the exciting thing, and it's interesting to see what's out there, and you can kind of spend hours doing that. But I think, the hidden side of it is who you're going to put in place to run it. A lot of the investors aren't going to run it themselves. Some would, like some are just looking to do it own operator, but most people want someone to run it, which means you either need to, if you're not doing it yourself, you need to hire a manager, which is possible. You can hire a kind of a CEO of the site, depending on the size, give them a salary, but you're going to have to kind of make sure they're trained, have experience, do onboarding, give them guidance and goals and stuff like that. And that might be a good fit for someone wanting to keep the site at the same level. Usually a manager can kind of just keep things ticking over so the wheels don't fall off. Or you can kind of look for an operator. And I kind of modeled this more on the Andrew Wilkinson style of business model. He runs Tiny, which buys different businesses and he puts CEOs in. And his model is very much just go out to a competitor and poach the person who's already been there, done that, and just put them in as CEO. So if you can do that where you have a proven operator, that helps minimize the risk because you already know they've done it before. But you can also find someone who you think is talented but has no industry experience. That's an option as well. If you think they're talented enough in your personal network and you want to give them a shot, there's more risk, but that's an opportunity. And occasionally, if you buy a site, you might be able to keep some of the team and promote some of the team to manage the site for you. So that's a lot rarer, especially in website sales. But sometimes on the smaller end, especially in the SaaS things, trying to acquire kind of software engineers that they think are smart is definitely a option as well. And chief operators kind of aims to be the proven talent model. So having someone in that has already proven themselves, just to help minimize the risk for those big deals.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I would say also it's really important. Like it depends on what type of business this is. If you have an e-commerce business, when what the operator needs to do is generally pretty straightforward, so they can probably kind of figure it out and learn quickly. Then it comes to growing, that does require some special skills. But for example, for a content side, it can be a lot more challenging to understand for someone who doesn't know any SEO or doesn't know much SEO. So you certainly want someone who understands a fair bit. And with the software or SaaS business, yeah, you have to have someone with experience of managing some software development or similar expertise.
Yeah, and no one wants to give up equity because that's the purchase you made. But if you can get the growth from someone who has a lot of experience, like with you guys, you have 15 years experience. So if you give up some equity, you'll be getting more growth back. So that growth should cancel out the equity you lose in raising the value of the site, hopefully.
And how do you structure the equity? Would you set up a separate company, like a separate LLC for the business, or would you just have a contract?
Yeah, there's a few different ways you can do it. We're in the community, we're mainly doing just the connection part. So we don't actually do the whole brokerage flow yet, which is, putting the whole deal together with the lawyers. But what I would recommend is trying to vest that over a certain period of time. So you don't just get access to 40% of the company straight away. It kind of vests over time, similar to like the startup venture capital world. And then also tie that to performance goals. So hitting certain monthly revenue benchmarks or some other goals, depending on the business, that might unlock more equity for the operator as well over time. Are two of the common things I've seen in contracts so far.
What is the price range with an acquisition? Like, what's the minimum range where it really makes sense to get an operator, do you think?
I would say the sweet spot is kind of low to mid six figures up to kind of the private equity boundary of like 5 million. I think somewhere in there. It's actually hard in the lower range in a 200K site to have an operator in, or maybe I should say in our community, it's rarer because they have experience running sites at larger levels. So it's really hard to entice someone, even with a lot of equity, to run a 200K site. And if it's making 200K, you don't have that much room for salary. So it's hard to get people interested, but kind of in the 7-figure range, that's when you have a lot of cash that you can play with, hopefully, for salary. And then that's very interesting to a lot of operators because if they have a playbook to grow a company from 1 million to 2 million or 1 million to even more, 5, 10 million, and then sell to private equity, then they can kind of see the roadmap and know that the equity there is going to be super valuable. But I think in the kind of 200K to 2-3 million is a really interesting range to grow sites, kind of below private equity and high net worth people. There's kind of a lack of buyers in that range, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's what we found ourselves as well. We have some businesses that we buy and manage for clients for about 100 to 100,000, and it's usually it's often just not profitable for us. Like it's somewhat kind of like pays the expenses, maybe some minor profit, but certainly it can be difficult to entice investors. So we only buy those because we know they're good deals. We know we'll be able to grow them and make a profit. But if we were just managing $100,000 or a couple $100,000 website, that would just not be enough upside or enough profit really for an operator. So I agree with that. Probably mid 6 figures is the best. And but there are also many people who are looking to acquire a smaller business like 50,000 or 100,000. So what can they do if they don't know what they are doing yet? They don't have experience, but they want someone to manage it.
Yeah. The smaller range, you could definitely buy a personal site and then put an operator in. But in a 50K, it's really hard to find a proven operator. You could find an operator. There would be definitely people that you could put in, but it would just be riskier because they'd have less experience. So your knowledge on them doing it well is harder, and it's quite hard to do the smaller sites. But what's interesting there is we've got some people who are kind of at the lower six-figure range, the 100K to 200K, which isn't enough to buy a decent, sizable business for an operator sometimes, especially in like SaaS and things where multiples are high. But they might club together with 2 or 3 investors. So I think that's going to become increasingly common, having like mini collectives where they work together, pool their funds, and all pick one operator. I think that's going to be an interesting future for that model.
Yeah, definitely. I think group buys are quite a good thing. We are looking into setting those up as well currently, as we have a few deals, a few good deals in mid 6 figures, and don't usually have investors looking to buy one, but multiple people would definitely be a good opportunity.
Yeah, and I think fishing in the kind of 500K to $1 million range is really interesting because most people don't have the cash to buy in that range, whereas 100K, some people might have saved enough to do that. Yeah. And a lot of people kind of reach a peak. Content might be a slightly different one, but definitely in e-commerce and things, in SaaS probably, they might be like, in SaaS, you might be an engineer and you've grown a company with product market fit and you got it to a good revenue so that you know it's working at 500K. But you haven't got the sales background to go and do commercial sales for someone or to do the marketing online and Facebook ads or whatever. So picking up something that's kind of reached the limit of one person's solo company and then putting your experience in and your team's background, that makes that a really interesting acquisition space to play in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best range is somewhere in between like low mid 6 figures to like low mid 7 figures, just in terms of acquisitions. It's above most individual investors or small groups. They can't afford that, and it's below the big private equity firms. That's probably where most of the best deals are right now. In terms of content, there is a big gap. Like most content businesses, they never really cross that gap of maybe $100,000 or $200,000 in value, because you just need a lot more age, a lot more value, stability to really get there. So the content businesses you see in mid 6 figures are generally substantially more valuable and established. And if you look at Empire Flippers, you'll see quite a lot of affiliate sites in that range that are maybe relatively new, just a couple of years of experience. But those are more like exceptions, I think. So yeah, and I've seen some really amazing businesses around $1 million range that have been around for like a decade or 2 decades, and they have staff and really high quality content and resources, like a relatively low risk, because at that point you don't really expect the rankings to drop. You don't expect the next Google update might hurt it, and it's just gonna either stay stable or keep growing or going down, but very slowly. So that's very different. And in e-commerce, the ceiling, like you mentioned, is a little bit higher. In e-commerce and SaaS, the ceiling is usually a little bit higher indeed. But also services businesses could be quite interesting. And if services businesses also, they often get up to maybe $500,000, $1 million in revenue, and sort of stagnate from there because it's hard to grow. So it's a very interesting idea to explore that cosmos of what happens when businesses hit that threshold. And then if you know what to do and you acquire and get them beyond that, there can be quite substantial growth, not just like a 20%, but like 3 times, 5 times once you solve that problem that prevents it from going up. Have you seen that happen as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And once you've done that once, you have that track record of taking it from that range to that range, like the 500K to 1.5 or a couple of like low seven figures, that just gives you so many possibilities because you have a track record. You can choose, hey, I'll do it again, or do it with a new site, or all the different options. And I think what's interesting is that in the search fund community, it's a similar model, really. It's having an operator go out and buy a business, but often they're kind of MBA graduates or something from Stanford, but they go and buy in the 5 to, 30, 40 million range company. And that's usually like a traditional company, like a manufacturing factory or something like that. Although it's becoming online a little bit more, but it still leaves that gap in the low seven figures range, which is where I think the people with experience now are building really interesting funds and portfolios, like, as you say, yourselves, Don Wells, Mohit Tader, those guys in the content space are doing interesting things right in that range.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some trends you are seeing among investors? Like certainly there are more investors now than before, and more investors than operators, and then deals available. But who are the typical investors that are looking to buy bigger businesses like $500,000, $1 million?
Yeah, that's why I love this project so far, because I've got to talk to so many different investors and operators, and the investors are interesting all around the world. There's different pockets of investors. But as for what they're looking, their backgrounds, there's kind of a few different ranges. So there's often like an entrepreneur that's had an online business and has sold it successfully and is looking to reinvest it. That's definitely like a core part of the community because they already know how websites work, especially in their vertical. So if they've sold a content site for 7 figures, they know what to look for in content sites, what a good operator would be, what a good deal looks like, and the same across each vertical. So that's one, definitely, especially with like the FBA aggregators. There's a lot of people having exits from FBA, deciding what to do with that money, whether it's traditional stocks investing or back into websites. Then you have, the private equity guys as well, interesting. So there's kind of the micro private equity guys who are looking to either bootstrap their own mini PE firm, buying in a certain vertical or a portfolio of sites. And then the bigger guys who are above that, who have a bit more experience buying sites and running them as well. So that's kind of the stage we're at the moment. People are building up their portfolios, especially the micro PE guys, to be bigger and to do more sites. And I think a lot of those guys seem to have started in the last like 6 months to a year. So they're still early on. They might have 2 or 3 sites now. But I think what's really interesting over the next year is to see those guys go on to be the lower 7-figure market before the private equity, and maybe sell on to the private equity as those deals mature.
Yeah, so the people looking to acquire $500,000, $1 million website, would those be mostly people who sold an online business already or who owned a business, like some similar business? Yeah. So they are not just newcomers to the industry.
Yeah, at the moment, it's so much easier to explain even just simple things like the difference between a content site and an e-commerce site. Like that seems obvious if you're in the website world, but to people outside it, there's not an obvious description. Like some people really don't understand the content world at all. So it's a lot easier to explain what you're investing in if you're interested in investing in operators. But I think the opportunity is actually in the reverse. So the website world has some investors in reinvesting money, and that number's growing as multiples are growing. There's more exits, there's more sales volume, etc. at the moment. But the money is actually in like the public money, which is the guys who are choosing, shall I invest in real estate or stocks? And then having websites as a third option. It might not fit everyone's profile because it's still going to be higher risk, but it's going to be a great option to give great returns. So I think the option there is just educating that market on these opportunities, letting them know that websites aren't, some crazy scam. There's actually profitable cash flowing businesses that have run for a long period of time. And although it's risky, you can mitigate that by having proven operators in. So I think kind of educating them on that step, and also providing the operators is going to be the key, because they don't have the knowledge or the skills to run the site. So how you solve the operators is going to be key to getting that public money invested.
Yeah, absolutely. Going wide is the key to expansion. And are you already seeing many people for your contacts, for your experience, who have no experience in that industry yet, and are just like learning and going to do their first deal, and they are looking to spend quite a bit? Or are you still seeing few of those compared to the ones that have already owned online businesses?
Yeah, I think because a lot of the growth of the community so far has been word of mouth of people saying this is an interesting place to see what happens here. Most people know about websites, or if they don't, they've kind of been listening to different podcasts and thinking about it, even if they haven't bought one yet or invested in one. So most people have like a background grounding on the sort of opportunities there. But I have had some people who own multiple traditional companies, like traditional service companies or physical-based businesses, who are looking to do more online stuff. They might have a deal that does some stuff online, like a automotive parts store, and they've started selling online, whereas traditionally it was just retail. And now they're realizing this is really interesting and kind of going down the rabbit hole. So I think the more content everyone puts out in the website world about the case studies, basically, of how this works, like from funds that have raised money and the returns they've given, like you have, and as well as individuals who've done well from their sites, and from the brokerages that produce their end of industry reports. I think that's all going to work together to get those guys involved in future deals.
Yeah. From my experience, I've seen most of the investors I've spoken to, and I've spoken to quite a few of the past couple of years, and the ones that we are working with now, they haven't owned an online business directly. They may have had some small sites or bought one site at some point, but mostly they have some offline businesses, or like they're in real estate. So usually they've learned quite a bit about online business. They've listened to podcasts, including ours. They've researched things, but haven't yet acquired or run the site themselves. Is that similar to your experience as well?
Yeah, I would say they're kind of aware of the world, but might not have been directly involved in it. But I think as a general, that percentage of the population, if you kind of quizzed everyone in like a massive census, that percentage would be very small, like in the grand scheme of things. I think there's still a big market, but it's still very small percentage wise. So multiples are going up just with that small percentage. So I think that's what's really interesting, that as soon as this public money comes in, and it will just become more normal over time, the online world is exactly kind of, I compare it to like real estate or commercial real estate. It's kind of coming online, and it will become more normal the same way real estate investing and commercial real estate investing is quite normal. So yeah, I think that's what's really exciting for the future at the moment.
Absolutely. And what trends do you see among operators? Are those people who owned and operated and grown their own business generally and then want to look into operating others? Or are these people that have already managed several businesses before?
Yeah, operators traditionally, have run their own site and sold it. And that's kind of given them a platform, and they've kind of gone deeper into the world and done different deals. That's a common way. One interesting one that was out of the box, and I didn't expect when I started it, is agencies coming across. So agency does client work, maybe digital marketing type agency, or even like specialized Shopify or e-commerce agency. Kind of a growth marketing based agency might come in. They've done client work and been successful, so they're making profitable cash every month. And then they're looking at actually investing that money into websites, because hey, they've done it for all these clients, but they can actually buy a website. And you can, there's different ways to buy websites, getting SBA loans or seller financing and stuff, where you don't have to have too much money to buy a website. It's definitely possible with the business profits, and then running those. And then they're pivoting more towards away from clients, or definitely away from cash or from clients, more into buying their own sites. Yeah. And if they do work with clients, often they try and be more equity, although how often that works is pretty small, but trying to get equity to grow their brands as well. So that's the interesting trend that I'm seeing recently. So it's kind of an interesting mix of operators at the moment.
Yeah, very good. And so what would be a typical structure for operator to charge for operating, let's say, $500,000 website, a content website, or a similar business otherwise? Yeah, in that range. How would most of those deals be structured? In terms of equity or a fixed fee from what you've seen?
Yeah, this would be not based on like thousands of deals of data. So this is just based on what I've seen so far. But I would say kind of it fits into the kind of Empire Flippers capital model where I think they put in maybe 6% for Empire Flippers, the actual operators. So kind of 5, 6, 7%, somewhere like that, the operator puts in. So on a 500K deal, then 5% of that, which is doable for most operators because they have experience selling sites. They have some capital. Whether they choose to invest it all or not, they can kind of choose the amount. And then you're kind of looking at, 30, 40%, somewhere around there of that company over time. Again, varying on your experience, slightly in the vertical because a 500K content site is very different to a 500K e-com site. And then a lot of the opportunities kind of based on the investor and the operator taking it offline and doing their negotiations themselves. So if you're an operator, sometimes the operators actually want salary. They have a family, mortgage, whatever. They just want to take more salary and less equity. They want to have less risk. So you can kind of negotiate that however you want, like what best suits your lifestyle. And I think the operator, if you have experience, is where you can kind of negotiate and be in a good position to negotiate those terms to what you're interested in. But a lot of operators, especially if they work in an agency or something, sometimes they work in an agency for a while, have managed portfolios, or in these micro PE firms have managed portfolios on a salary, but didn't realize, I can get equity in some of these deals. That's another trend as well with operators realizing 30% equity is a lot better than a salary, even if it's a fairly good salary for running the portfolio.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. All right, very good. Any extra remarks, advice for buyers, sellers, operators, investors? Anything I haven't asked you yet?
No, I think we've covered quite a range of topics. I think the most interesting thing is just to explore it, even if it's not an opportunity that fits you right now. It might be interesting in the future. And if you're just aware of it, then at least you're one step up on everyone else. So yeah, definitely investigate how the operator model could work if you're interested in becoming an operator. And from an investor, if you're looking to do a passive investment and you realize that websites provide good returns, then likewise, this gives a good opportunity to explore what that could look like. Because a lot of this infrastructure stuff is getting built now. We don't have that much infrastructure in the kind of website investing world if compared to real estate or something. So getting involved now is a really interesting time as this stuff gets built, people start doing deals. There's a nice range of operators for the investors to choose from. So it's an interesting time to go out and look at deals as multiples keep going up.
Yeah, excellent. So Sam, how can people reach out to you or join your community?
Yeah, you can. I'm happy to have a chat with people. So you can reach out to me on Twitter. It's at the Sam Bass on Twitter. My DMs are open. Happy to give advice if you're thinking about becoming an operator in the future, even if you're maybe not there at the moment. Or if you're an investor interested, happy to give feedback on who you should connect to or intro with. And anyone that wants to apply for the community, it's chiefoperators.io. There's an application form on there for operators and investors. You can find out all the different information, and then I do a call with everyone to see if you'd be a good fit for the community. So again, in that call, I'm happy to give feedback. If it's not a fit right now, I'm happy to share some things you could do, or some resources or tips or people that might be helpful as well.
All right, very good. Well, thanks for joining. A pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Domain Magnet is a leader in buying and selling online businesses with a proven track record of expertise gained from over 300 deals since 2004. To learn more about how we can help you acquire or exit a profitable online business today, head over to domainmagnet.com for more details.